Well, here we are. We finally made it to Moorfield Campground in Mesa Verde National Park. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and we are in our campsite, which is part of Moorfield Campground. We haven't had time to film yet because we've been busy setting up camp, but as we were setting up camp, there were plenty of deer around. Yes, we're cooking dinner and we're smiling into the camera. As you can see, we're wedged in fairly tightly in our campsite. It'll be a little bit clearer tomorrow about how wedged in we are. But the sequoia fits in fairly nicely, as we can see. And we've got the lanterns and we're on our battery so far. Everything seems to be working okay. I doubt this camera will pick up how beautiful the sky is tonight. But it certainly is. Obviously, it's having a little bit difficulty adjusting, isn't it? From that little blur. But I'll pan around the campsite.
Dinner's ready.
Just so we can see if there's anything to be seen. Although I doubt it, as I said. As you can see, Barbara's sort of ignoring that dinner is ready.
Well, I just want to finish my sentence.
What were you convicted for? She wanted to finish her sentence, and I didn't know what she was convicted for. At any rate, we can see that the...
Come, follow us inside.
Welcome to our happy camper.
Come, follow us around as we go inside this working trailer.
God, this is Jackie Kennedy at the White House.
The rich and famous.
Bye, Julia. Julia's tired.
I think it's your turn to use the porta potty.
He's getting to be a baby with it. Oh, grand tour of the Coleman. Bedroom, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, closet space.
Ample room for all your needs.
Elegant light fixtures.
Kathy trying to work on a zipper.
Sunny sitting on Martha's feet.
Is it working out?
Yeah, that tooth
is off. I'll put it under my pillow and
maybe the tooth fairy.
Yes, but we have a different, we're going in a different way.
Loose tooth. Off the zipper. What's her original?
Julia is going to have the same method that was used for me as a child. The tooth fairy needs to be able to fly and under the pillow. So it goes into the
What we always did was we had big pillows.
Wait, check that. Just like the picture.
What we did is we had these big pillows with like lace and ribbon and a little pocket on it. And you put the tooth in the pocket, you put the little pillow under yours so that the tooth fairy could find the big one right away. You just put the tooth under your foot and put it in the whole pillow. Which also worked out pretty well.
Daddy, are you really not filming?
No, I'm really filming.
You are?
And we're talking about the tooth fairy.
Mm-hmm.
You said you weren't filming.
I lied.
I know.
Those faces were great.
And I made those stupid faces into the camera thinking you weren't filming.
That'll learn you.
As I said before, he's getting to be obnoxious with that thing.
You won't regret it when you get the finished film.
Oh, I know. I get a copy of it.
I'll regret it when we get the finished film.
Memories of this wonderful vacation.
Okay?
Don't
Well,
try to put me on. Maybe we should put maybe a piece of duct tape or something.
Okay. Would you like to go out and do it?
Oh, is it out there?
yes, it's out there.
Okay, well, We won't worry about
I
that.
think it's time to go to bed.
You mean don't zip it up further than that?
Right, because it'll probably come off.
Okay. Do we have any tape in here at all, or is all the tape outside?
I'll look.
I mean,
It's outside.
No, I can't see. I don't have my glasses on. She's asleep right back there. Non, mais moi je suis un peu.
Mom, bring my hat.
We might be able to find it when we go out. I don't know how to go out. We got another. Mother kept us. Oh, this thing was about this big with two heads. So make it kind of
But if you thought they're not supposed to
One's downstairs. It's one of our worst problems that we have here. When you go down into this dwelling, there's going to be times that I'm not going to be with you. I'm either going to have to be ahead of you or behind you for safety reasons. When you're in the dwelling, please do not enter any of the small rooms. Please do not enter any of the small rooms. Is that understood? Okay, that's what the last group said, and I went in there and there were 20 people in the small rooms. Please stay out of these small rooms. They're very delicate. Also, at the top of, in the first courtyard, there is a wall there. The wall is an original wall. It has been about 25% reconstructed. It's very strong. We could all probably lean on it and dance on it, and it's no big deal. The problem is that it's about a 75 to 100 foot vertical drop off the side. So therefore we ask you, please do not lean on the wall, not for damage reasons, but for safety reasons. Okay? We'll proceed from this point down about 100 yards to the top of the metal staircase. Please stay at the top of the metal staircase. Do not go beyond that point. Okay, let's get started. Let's go ahead and move up out onto this rock a little bit. You can go ahead and come out here as long as you don't push me off, we're okay. I don't know how long you've been in the park, so I'm going to try to give you some preliminary information before we go down. These people were called Anasazi by the Navajo. It's a Navajo word. It means ancient people, ancient ones, possibly even ancient enemy. We're not sure. We know that the Navajo and the Apache are definitely not descendants of these people because they came down from the north. They still speak similar words as the Athabascans in Alaska and Canada. The Utes, we think, were here twice. Once, in prehistoric times, they went up into north-central Colorado and up into Wyoming and came back down about the time of desertion here, or possibly even cohabiting in the latter years with these people. We do just think that the closest descendants of these people are the Hopi. And the Hopi call these people Hisaseman. And it just kind of translates into the people, or the ancient ones. They were about the same size as Europeans, the same period of time, men about 5'4", women about 5'1". Average age was about 35, 36 years old. Average. We found less than 300 grave sites for about 1,400 years of occupation. Half of those have been children under the age of 5, the others adults between 50 and 60. So there you're getting your 35-year-old average. We have found a couple skeletons that are 80 and 90. About half the personnel you talk to in the park are going to be very conservative about their archaeological point of view. The other half are going to be very liberal. Both are going to give you outdated information. We can't assimilate it fast enough to distribute it to the public. I'm one of the more liberal ones, and I like to get you thinking about new ideas, and new ideas in archaeology are about 10 years old. This is a place you want to use your imagination because we have a lot of unanswered questions here, and you're going to hear a lot of I don't know. Not just from me, but other people too. It's literally because we do not know. We thought for the longest period of time that desertion took place because of a 23-year drought. 12 of those years was almost literally with no moisture, rain or snow. About 10 years ago, with advanced technology and satellite photography, we discovered that the whole world went through a cooling off phase. Some parts of the world even experienced glaciers that weren't normal. We think the temperature up here dropped about 2 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't sound like a lot. But keep in mind they were already growing crops above 5,000 feet. So we now believe the main reason these people deserted this area was because they could no longer grow the amount of food that was necessary to sustain the population that had grown here. We had a freeze and 1.5 inches of snow here June 10th. That's why you're not seeing any flowers. 4 years ago we had a major freeze in mid-July. There's your crops, both cases. How are we doing? Any questions so far? This mesa is as high as 8,600 feet, slopes off to 5,000 to the south. It's really a big illusion here because it seems like we're higher than Cortez and Mancos, but we're not. We're very, very close at this point, and the valley even drops off further. So this area was essentially 1,400 feet lower than Mancos and Cortez at the other end of the mesa. The farming there was ideal. The next phase of this trip is a 600-yard walk down this path. You're going to come to the base of the 32-foot ladder. There probably will be a tour still up in the balcony house, so try to hold the noise down because the acoustics down here are phenomenal. Give them the same courtesy as we expect the tour that's coming behind us to give us. This is your last chance to turn back because we're going to go through a locked gate. Okay? Let's go.
Yeah, they should have worked. Yeah.
And this is the secondary water source for this dwelling. If we were to clear all this rubble out, it'd be about 3.5 to 4 feet deep. And this would be some of the cleanest, purest water that you ever drank in your life. It just came through a natural 200-foot thick sandstone filter. Very clean water. It's also one of a couple of ways that these alcoves are formed. Water seeps down through this sandstone. In the wintertime, it gets in the cracks, expands when it freezes, breaks off small pieces of the sandstone. The way these alcoves develop at even a faster rate is that there's a layer of shale between the upper layer of cliff house sandstone and the lower layer. Inside this layer of shale are pockets of bentonite, and when water comes in contact with bentonite, it expands 8 to 10 times. So therefore, the alcoves are created at a much quicker rate. The one that we're going up into is 35 feet tall, 50 feet deep, and 250 feet long. It's formed about 100,000 or 100 million years ago. This structure was inhabited about 1190 AD and abandoned, as all the others, about 1275. Water was a very precious commodity here. There has never been any running water on top of the mesa. For you to have a drink of water here, to take a shower, we have to pipe it in 42 miles away. And since you got to this point, that means that you had to drive onto the Ute Reservation for 300 yards. That road was built wrong in the early 30s. Nobody cared about it. There was no problem. In the mid-50s, one of the park engineers discovered it was wrong. It was built out onto the reservation, so they decided to build a second road, a new road. They built the second road wrong, and it's now extended 300 yards out into the reservation. Again, for 30 years, nobody cared. About 3 years ago, the Utes decided to capitalize on it. They put up a snow cone stand and a souvenir shop, and they're giving helicopter rides. Park Service was kind of indifferent about it, but the concession was furious. So we kindly asked the Utes to please cease and desist their operations, and they didn't. So we told them that if they did not, we would build a third road and cut their access off completely. Here's the catch. The Utes control all the water that comes into this park, every ounce of it. So they threatened us back. If we cut off their access, they'll just turn the tap off. That easy. Okay? So if you support the cause, stop and get a snow cone. Otherwise, just drive on through. We'll be here for a few more minutes. Looks like they are starting to exit. This is how I would like you to climb this ladder. The base of this ladder is cemented. The top of it is bolted in at the top. We've never had anyone fall from this ladder, and I'm not just saying that. Here's how I expect you to climb it. 2 at a time, side by side, and anywhere between 15 and 20 people on the ladder at the same time. It will barely quiver. As Americans and Europeans, we're not used to being on ladders, so we have a natural fear of them. The ladders that we get up on are 8 to 10 feet tall. They're rickety old wooden ones or aluminum ladders that someone has to help hold at the bottom so you can climb to the top of your roof. This isn't the case here. These are Douglas fir spars. It's very strong. If you have any type of fear of height or climbing ladders, look straight forward. Do not look up or down, and you're going to be fine. We'll get you to the top. Okay? We will not be climbing down anything. Always up. The path that we walked down to get to this point is not an original way into this dwelling. It was built by the CCC in 33 and 4 to make it easy for tourists to come down here and to cut down the traffic going through the dwelling by 50%. We will only be going through this dwelling one way. We will be exiting through the original entrance and exit way through the tunnel.
What was the original way to get into the entrance?
That's what we're going to be going out of.
The way we go out is the original way that the
Right.
Indians came.
Right. Okay? When you're looking at these structures, something that I want you to keep in mind, that of course there is no comparison to these structures to the castles along the Rhine or the chateaus in France. But, in my opinion, these people were living better than Europeans at the same period of time. First of all, they built these structures without the use of the horse, any domestic animals, the wheel, metal of any kind. They didn't have a potter's wheel. We find no engineering tools at all, and we think they went through 7, possibly 8 centuries without warfare here, right up to the point of desertion. So that's why I say we think that they were living better than Europeans at the time. They accomplished all this without the same tools and without war. Okay?
Since you know the period of time that they deserted,
Mm-hmm.
you can't find any other tracings of them somewhere else.
We think they went to the south, but we're not sure.
I see.
We're not sure.
I know they didn't vanish. They had to go somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you about them vanishing up on top. They may have.
How do you relate the desertion to the arrow-like roads that radiate out of Chaco?
We don't. We can't relate the desertion to Chaco because Chaco was deserted at 1150 AD, and this was deserted at 1275, 125 years later. The roads that have been photographed from satellites, we have no explanation for. Some of them are up to 8 lanes wide. They're perfectly level. Keep in mind they had no horses, oxen, wheels. We don't know why or how. Keep in mind, people, that the Aztecs made toys for their children with wheels on them, and the Aztecs never used the wheel technically. Okay? One more question and we got to go up.
If that was dug to 4 foot, which is the original, you suspect was the original, and how long would it take to fill it if it was drained?
This is a year-round water supply. one that we've been kind of keeping track of at another dwelling fills up about every 48 hours.
I see.
This was a drinking supply source, not farming supply source. Okay? Okay, with the last person through this gate, please close it. When you get to the top of the ladder, we will turn to the left and go out into the first courtyard. Again, please do not enter the small rooms. Please do not carve your initials on the walls. And be careful about leaning up against that wall. I don't care if you lean on the wall. That's your choice. Just be careful about it, okay?
Yeah.
Remember the trick on it. Just don't look down.
Get behind you.
Go on.
I'm going to. Okay, actually, he said to do it just like, see how the tree is and the spot is right behind it? We're going to do that too. I'm going to be right behind you.
Don't worry. I'm right here.
Yeah, you want to do that?
Especially because I'm anti-concession.
Oh, are you?
Yes, it is. One-way road.
Somebody stopped. A friend of mine stopped and I saw that. You're moving Mesa Verde.
Oh, yeah.
Turn around. That's right. Give me one of those.
It wouldn't have taken them long to see.
Where's Hemingway House?
It's over there.
What's the video?
We've never had anybody get stuck in the tunnel. I had a guy.
I thought that's what kids did.
No, they were for the concession.
Oh, they don't. Not me. People have that like a big these guys behind me were trying to
That's all concession. All those kids that were there, that's all concession.
You guys are bigger. You can be
I was talking to him, not you.
I was just waiting for it.
Yeah.
You said no parking anymore. Cigarette.
This is actually pretty amazing, you know? Yeah. Well, when did December of '88? Hey, Mom. Was the original last?
Robert, did you hear it? Yeah. No, go back to that.
Hurry up. Thank you.
This is one of my favorite places because I have a very serious Napoleonic complex. When I stand for you all, I feel
On the way out.
all the timber you see in the dwelling, except these ladders, are original. You're going to see a lot of original timber in a lot of the dwellings. We've located 4,000 dwellings in the park so far. 600 of those are in the cliffs. We do locate dwellings within 4,000-mile radius of the Four Corners area. These people were everywhere. The mud and plaster that you see on this balcony and on the balconies above the in-square room is all natural. It's all original mud and plaster. Notice how square these corners are, and you'll notice how round the kivas are on the other side. Circles are easy to make. All you have to do is tie a cord or a rope to a piece of wood, and you can make a perfect circle. It's not very difficult. But making perfect squares that are 3 and 4 stories tall is another story entirely. To date, we have found no engineering tool, none, not at the crudest kind, and we have no idea how they were doing this. This structure was built in 1190, abandonment same time. The new school of thought is that women and children built the majority of the buildings because the majority of handprints and fingerprints that we will find in the remaining mortar and plaster are those of women and small children. We do believe the men were making the blocks on top, bringing them down into women and children were actually doing the construction. You're going to hear a lot of new points of view about this subject. You're going to hear a lot about women's roles not only increasing in this culture but in native cultures all across America. Mostly that's due to a phenomenal increase of women into a predominantly male-oriented profession. It's refreshing. We love it. We're getting a lot of new points of view that we never even saw before. So it is to our advantage to have this happening to us. But you're going to start hearing a lot more about it. Some people are even suggesting that this was a matrilineal society. Today, the Hopi women still do the majority of the building. They are the property owners, and they control the family situations. They are the power structure. If a man comes home and finds his slippers outside the front door, he is not allowed to re-enter the dwelling until he's invited in by his mother-in-law. That's how much power women in the Hopi tribe still have today. And it is respected. And we think that is what went on here also, that the women were a major power structure here. Any questions so far? We will be going through an original passageway to get to the other courtyard. This side was built about 20 years before the other side. The old average was they considered one person per room. We don't believe that anymore. After all, we do think about 60% of the population stayed on top and only about 40% moved below. We find it very difficult to understand why a communal society would suddenly decide to split and that they would go to all this trouble so everyone could have their own room. So now we use the basis of 2 people on a good average per room. I've been in some cliff dwellings in West Central Africa that are very similar to this. They've been occupied for 750 years by the Dogon, and they average just under 4 people per room. The rooms are about the same size, very close. When we came down, somebody asked about difficulty of getting in and out of these dwellings. They literally carved toe and handholds into the rock. And they used the live rock outside to climb up and down, just like a ladder. We find that hard to accept as adults because we're conditioned to be afraid of climbing, and we also condition our children to be likewise. We think the children here were probably learning to climb, not necessarily vertically, but learning to climb as they were learning to crawl. After all, we did find out that babies in the mid-60s could learn to swim before they could learn to walk. So it's very, very feasible. The skeletons that we find are not those of crushed people, broken up bones. The burial sites that we have found here, we do not find a class system. All the adults that we have found are basically buried in the same fashion. The children's graves that we find here are very elaborate in comparison. Many artifacts, they're wrapped in woven blankets and then mats, where the adults were generally not wrapped in blankets or had any kind of leaning to. So they were very into burying their children in a very special way. So children must have been very important to the society, whereas adults, we don't feel there was a class system there. Very communal, very equal. These are original toe and handholds on this rock. It has been increased about 3 times its size by the Park Service in the 20s to make it easier for adults and children to climb up. And this is a real good example of one of those possible places where children could have been learning to climb as they were learning to crawl. Look how easy this rock is at an angle. Just about the right space for knees and toes and hands, and if they fell, right into mother's arms. Right? They wouldn't even fall, they would just roll. I'm not saying that that's what this was, but here's an example of what is a way that they could have taught their kids to climb. Right here, possible. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the other side. We'll talk about key visibility over there.
Go ahead.
All the way out here and around.
These are original timbers?
Yes, they are.
All the timbers up here are original.
They are. The whole stack of them right there. That are left over. Okay, you can't go back there.
Right?
You can't go back there. Back. We're asking you to do it out of respect for our request and also for the request of the Hopi. And I will leave this area before you all do, and so please do not go back there. The Hopi were here about 3 weeks ago. They danced here for 2 days. This is the first time in known history that the Hopi have danced in this park. And they came here and blessed this dwelling. There's some cornmeal and tobacco and back there placed in a certain way. We do not want it disturbed, and the Hopi do not want it disturbed. So please don't. Please take your legs out of that kiva. Thank you. These are kivas. These were primarily their ceremonial rooms. Covered with a roof. If you go to Spruce Tree House, we've recovered the roofs of 3 of them. Give you an idea of what the roof looked like. The primary thing that I want to show you in the kiva is the sipapu. Right down here, it's a small hole. It's called the spirit hole, the sipapu. It's a Hopi word. The Hopi say it's a representation of the Grand Canyon, and that these people came from the 3rd level of creation up through the sipapu into the 4th level of creation, which is now. Some of the Hopi elders suggest that the reason that we cannot find very many grave sites and that we really do not know where these people went to was because they lived in harmony here for such a long time with nature that they raised their level of consciousness, went back through the sipapu, and are now in the 5th creation of life. And that's why we cannot find them. So that's an interesting thought. The most popular theory for the visitors, one that I won't agree with, is that UFOs came here and picked all these people up. I'm not saying extraterrestrials don't exist. I just don't think it happened here in that way. Some things I want to point out to you on this side. The 2 long timbers that we have here, we have absolutely no idea what they were used for. Absolutely none. When you're looking at the ceilings of these alcoves, the very dark, black stuff is the soot. The very black thing you see like at the top of the alcoves, and you'll see them further back in, it's got an orangish tint to it, is manganese leaching out from the sandstone. So watch out for those 2. They can trick you. This was the 10th dwelling that Gustav Nordskold excavated in 1891. So there is a number 10 carved in that wall behind you. Keep in mind, people, that the alcove is formed exactly the same way on top as it is on bottom. It's got a fair-sized curvature to it. Everything that was built in the cliffs, other than small structures way up in the mids, are built up from the bottom. A lot of these dwellings are going to have anywhere between 10 and 20 feet of fill in it, just to raise these floors up. The base of this kiva and the one next to it is the bottom of the alcove. Everything else is built up there. It's other engineering feat. How did they level it all off? We don't know. When we exit, we're going to be going through the original entrance and exit way. This tunnel is 12 feet long. Take a second to look through it before you enter it, because from this side, you can see the exit. But when you crawl through it and look back, you can't see the entrance on the other side. It's got a nifty little curve in it. We have no idea why they did it, and it's the only one we've ever found. Also, for those of you that are already over on this side, you can see this a lot better, and when you folks come around, if you look at that number 10, go about a yard or a meter to the left of the number 10, you can see some pecking in the wall. About 5 or 6 inches above the pecking is a positive handprint. A positive handprint is when they put their hand against a rock and blew a chemical dust on it. A negative handprint is when they dip their hand in something and then press their hand on the rock. Understood? Okay. In this room right here, number 24, there's a little bit of pigment still left on the wall. It's just an orangish brown band. Please do not sit on the wall. It's an orangish brownish band across the top, and it's got a series of 3 projectiles on top. We have absolutely no idea what it means. This is almost gone. It will probably disappear within the next 10 years. We have no way of preserving it. There's only 4 examples that you have a chance to see in the park. Okay? Any questions?
These things that are open here and over there, were they originally closed-in rooms?
These were rooms.
They just,
This dwelling is about 82% as we found it 100 years ago.
What are those little, like, cat boxes that have no leaf into them?
Okay, these little square openings in the side is where we found ceremonial objects like eagle claws, quartz crystals, animal fetishes, Kachina dolls, things like that. You can see all those kinds of things in the museum. I've seen them as deep as 10 inches. No, it's not real deep. Some of them we found are pottery lined.
Are these,
Real unusual.
what are these?
That's what they stack the lumber on top of to make the roof. They call it pilasters. If you go to Spruce Tree, you can really see what that's like. It's dome-like inside, but it'll be flat on top. Entrance was gained through a hole in the center of the roof, down in.
Why would they have 2 kivas?
Why does Cliff Palace have 23? Why does a small...
So yeah, I'm sure they went back and forth. How many?
These dwellings that exist in this park.
Okay, we have 600 dwellings in the park, cliff dwellings, about 4,000 square feet.
There are 4,000 square feet.
So that shows you really have everybody, people have been in there, but they haven't been assigned to the spectacular
Maybe they put ice in there and it was their ice water.
Oh no. No.
Yeah. It was.
You were in there.
like this already all set up.
Yeah.
Just being able to relax. Hello, Cole.
Want to get a little closer, Dad?
Didn't have anything, Barbara.
Oh, I want to pet it.
We're on tape, Julia.
I want to pet it, Mom. I want to pet it. This is another car. It's a girl one. I think it fell in love. Why are they just...
I could have picked up your orange peels to give it, but I thought it'd make it back.
I want to pet it. Have you ever been alone met each other? Maybe he'll come back. He'll come back. I'll just say, you're here. I think it's coming back. Look, there's 3 deers. But one, oh no, one's crossing the street. I wonder one is going to... Come on, Bee, come. Come on.
Here. Here. Jen?
House this afternoon, or we're still, well, no, we're just, I guess we're officially this afternoon right now. My name is Gretchen. I'd like to welcome you here to Mesa Verde National Park. And as we go, feel free to ask any questions you like, and comments, observations, whatever. You know, this is your tour, and a lot of archaeology is a bit of guesswork. You know, we've based some opinions on looking at the evidence that's left behind. We don't have all the pieces to this puzzle, so there are a lot more questions than we will ever have answers to. And I like to think that archaeology uses a little common sense, and we all have some of that. So we can use some of our own thoughts and ideas and feelings to maybe figure out what was happening here as we look at the ruin known as Longhouse. It is the second largest ruin at Mesa Verde. This one housed probably anywhere between 150 to 200 people. There were 150 rooms in this dwelling at one time. Okay, before we go down, is this the first trip into a cliff dwelling for anybody? Or is everybody old-timers? Oh, few people first? Okay, well then why don't we go back a little bit and do some basic information before we go down, so we all know a little bit about what I'll be talking about here. Now, there is a general term that's used to describe the people that used to live here, and that is the word Anasazi. Anybody know what that means? Offhand? The ancient ones, right? The old people, the people that lived here before. Those are all possible translations for that word that refers to these people. It is a word that anthropologists and archaeologists started using to describe the people that used to live here. It is a Navajo word, but almost every group within the Southwest does have a name for these people also, and it usually means something like the ancient ones. Well, the people that used to live here were farmers. They had homes up here on the mesa tops. In the early days, they lived in pit houses. Later on, they developed multi-story pueblos up here. And the Anasazi grew for themselves corn, beans, and squash, perhaps some grains, and also some cotton in later years. And they seem to have had a pretty good life going for them up here on the mesa top. But at one point, they decided to move their homes into caves and natural alcoves that you find inside the cliffs in this sandstone cap that we're standing on. Now, if you've got a pretty good life going for yourself up here on this mesa top, why would you move your home down into a cave? Anybody got any ideas? Maybe the weather's changing. Maybe things are happening to the point that you got to get out of the rain or get away from the cold or all sorts of things like that. And you know, these people who lived here for 700 years, maybe they had used up a lot of the resources up here. And trees up here take a long time to grow. So if you're running out of firewood and you live in a cave, you're going to trap the heat and it's going to stay warmer in there during the winter time. Think of protection maybe from enemies. That's a possibility. Not a lot of evidence to support that. But what about the shelter and security that a cave affords? I know everybody took off and went on vacation and locked the house up, right? This is a bit like locking the house up, having a place that's hard to find and hard to get to. So that's a possibility. All of these things are something to think about as we go. Maybe try to just discover or think of some other reasons and share them with us if you want. And we'll also talk a little bit, I think, about why the people left here eventually. Because by the year 1300, these dwellings were left behind and weren't found again until the 1800s. So think about that as we go. I'll stop a couple of times along the way as we go down the trail. Any questions before we leave up here? Okay, well, let's go take a walk. Hundreds of years, and they seem to have been pretty good at figuring out the land and how to understand the patterns of use. And one thing we don't have a lot of around here is rainfall. Now, if you were here in the park yesterday afternoon, we got a little wet, but that's the kind of a normal pattern for the summertime. Short, little brief rain showers. That doesn't do a whole lot of good for a large amount of crops. So these people were dryland farmers, and they did understand about water runoff. We do get about 18 inches of precipitation a year, but most of it comes down as snow during the winter months. That doesn't do your crops a whole lot of good either. But they did understand that when we got those rain showers, the rain comes down hard and fast, and it brings topsoil down off the mesa top. And what we have behind me here is a gully, and in this gully you can see where some walls have been created. Back here is a check dam, or a little terrace. And this terrace was a means of capturing moist soil behind the wall, and it created a garden plot for them. So this was a means of keeping it moist, not having to worry about watering it, and it kind of took care of itself. And that's the technique that we see being used here on the mesa tops. We see these terraces all over the place, not just here. This is a very small one, but it does give you a little idea of some of their technology. They were very good at making use of the natural environment, it seems. Probably made use of the pinyon and juniper. The juniper has a berry that can be made into a tea. The pinyon drops a nut. But right behind me, there's a yucca plant. They may have made use of that as a food source. Also, we know that the plant itself was used to make baskets out of. So the natural environment for them afforded them a lot of wealth, aside from the crops that they were growing. And we find examples of the foods that they were collecting in the dwellings. So we know they were making use of the environment around them. And evidently did a pretty good job for a long time. Any questions before we continue on? Okay, well, the next place we'll get to are 2 long flights of stairs. Please use the railing as we go down.
The check dam from the other direction.
In and out of here. Can you spot them in the rock here behind me? Can you see them? There's a depression right by using this as a means of getting in and out of here for close to 100 years, if not longer. This was a means of getting in and out of this cliff dwelling. Hand and toe holds or footpath here goes along the ledge, up that way, and up into the next ledge there where the rocks kind of come to a V up there. That's where you can see the hand and toe holds continue on up. So this was an Anasazi staircase, a means of coming in and out. Now, you might consider that by moving down here into this cliff face, they actually made their life a bit harder for themselves. Think of the concern that you might have as a parent for your child using this as a way to get in and out of here. What about the burden of just carrying things in and out? You know, you're doing all your harvesting and you're growing up top here on the mesas, and then you've got to bring everything down in here to store it. Now, they may have lowered things over the side. Still, there's going to be a lot of carrying of stuff in and out of here. So maybe it was harder, but perhaps the security or whatever reason they moved down here was more important to them than the means of getting in and out of here. It's a possibility anyway. Something to think about. Let's continue on down the trail. We'll stop right before we go into the dwelling itself. I could possibly stop talking at this point and never say another word, and you'd leave here with some very definite opinions and feelings about the people that used to live here. You could probably see why it was called Longhouse. Look how long this dwelling is. That's why the archaeologists called it that. And it did house probably close to 150 to 200 people. 150 rooms were here at one time. Now, some of those rooms are no longer in existence because a lot of Longhouse was built on fill dirt, and that falls in after 700 years of being abandoned. So some of the rooms that used to be here are no longer, and in some places there were 3 and 4 stories here. And from the tops of those roofs, people would use ladders to get into the upper areas here, where you see this is what we think were storage facility for them. So everything was accessed, usually probably by some sort of a ladder. And we're going to go climb a couple ladders here in just a bit. Now, this was at one time someone's home, and because of that, we would like all of us to respect it as such. And because it is a very fragile resource, we do ask that you not walk on the walls themselves, and please don't sit on the original walls. There are sandstone ledges that we can sit on and walk on instead. That way you'll help us take care of the resource here, because the Park Service does not rebuild these. What we do is stabilize them and take care of them as they are, as opposed to putting them back the way they were. So please help us take care of the dwelling as we go through. Okay? As we do go up the ladders, if you've got a camera or bag, something dangling in front of you, might sling it off to the side or on your back so it doesn't get in your way as you go up the ladders. Please use both hands as we go up. If anybody has a problem with climbing a ladder, I can have you go around another way. But these are not bad at all. Just look right in at the wall as you go up. You shouldn't have any problem. Here we go. little idea of the average size of a room right here, check out these doorways. That's what these are right here. These are doorways. They crawl.
It do.
He's not even breathing, huh?
His daddy is. Can we need everybody to stay together over here? You need to stay over here. In this place. Maybe 150 to 200 people lived here. Perhaps more people than that were living here when there was periods of overpopulation affected them. So maybe 200, maybe even 300 people lived here. Put all of that noise here together at the same time. And you can hear my voice and Susan's voice kind of conflicting with each other here at this point. But put 100 people in here all talking at once. Children playing and crying, laughing, babies crying. And then let's add the sound of the domesticated animals they had. They did have turkeys and dogs. Turkey pens in here. So let's put the sound of the birds and the animals, plus the people. Was this a nice, quiet place to live in? It was very full of life, very noisy in here, I would imagine. And just the general conversation of when you're working here, sharpening tools, doing things like this, grinding some corn up, add all those sounds in there, and maybe even some building sounds. You know, they regularly rebuilt in here, remodeled, added things. This was a constant, ongoing process. So a very lively place. Now let's add the sense of smell to that. We used our ears to imagine. Let's use our noses to imagine. All of these people are producing a lot of trash and garbage and human waste and all that other stuff that has to be dealt with. Well, most of the time, all that stuff is going right off the front out here. That's where the trash refuse area is. So was this a pleasant smelling place, at least to our noses? Probably not. And add a hot summer day to that on top of it. So it was a place that was definitely full of a lot of life. And, let's add something else. Grinding stone here for grinding corn, matati and amano. When you grind corn here, you grind sandstone on sandstone with the corn in between. Well, if I take two pieces of sandstone here and I grind them on each other, look what happens. That goes into your cornmeal. So that means you've got a lot of grit in there, and it's going to grind on your teeth. You know, some of the burials that we have found show us that people by about the age of 25 or so, their teeth were ground way down. So is that going to be real comfortable for you? No, probably not. Now, we get this idea sometimes that it would have been a wonderful adventure to have lived in this cliff dwelling here. I mean, we give them names like Cliff Palace. You know, it seems like it would have been wonderful, wouldn't it? Well, it probably was a hard life. And you didn't live that long either. At the age of 35 or 40, that was a life expectancy. Some people made it into their 50s and 60s, but not as a regular thing. So your life expectancy, maybe 35 to 40 years. Having to eat with teeth that were hardly there. Dealing with the noise, the sounds, the smells. It probably was a full life for these people. And a very labor-intensive life. You spent most of your time working, not a lot of playtime. So they couldn't even sit back and maybe enjoy this view that we have to look at. And plus, if you look at this view every day for 20 or 30 or 40 years, it gets pretty commonplace. So maybe they didn't regard it the same way we do. Now, the people in Longhouse were somewhat fortunate because there is a water source in the dwelling. Now, they did have a spring in here, a seep spring. So they didn't have to walk 3 or 4 or 5 miles to get it water. They may have had to go that far, though, to get more water when the spring was not producing as much as they needed. So at least they did have a little indoor plumbing in this place. That's where we'll go take a look next. Before we go, I think I pointed out the grooves here for the sandstone, and the sandstone here used for sharpening tools. And this is an original wall here. To give you a little idea of construction method. The chinking, this is an original wall. The chinking in here was put into the mortar to prevent shrinkage of the mortar. It was a very intelligent way of doing this because it added strength to the wall, especially when you're using blocks that are of uneven shapes. Then you have to use more mortar. By putting these chinks in here, though, it creates a situation where it lends strength to the wall, and it also prevents that mortar from shrinking too much and loosening the blocks later. So it was a very sound method of construction. Stone Age people, they had no metal to work with. So this was all created with stone tools and the hands. So it was very, very well done.
What was the mortar?
Well, the mortar is a mud that's rich in clay, and we think the source for this mortar was about 10 miles from here. So they were hauling the dirt about 10 miles to another spring about 5 miles from here, mixing it, we think, then with the water, and then hauling it the last 5 miles or so. So just imagine the labor involved with building this place. And they had no beasts of burden. They had no horses or oxen or anything like that. So they were doing it all with their own power behind it. No mules, right.
No wheels.
Oh, no wheels, right. Let's go take a look where the spring's located. Across the back of the cave there, walk right on over. For 150 people? Probably not. They probably had to go further for additional water if they needed it. But also, all back along here, you see this green stuff. Water is seeping out of the sandstone cap here, all along the back edge. Now, if you cut down a lot of the plants up above to use for either farmland, to use that area, or to use the plants themselves for food or fuel or building materials, that means there's going to be less vegetation up there to take up the water. So more water is going to seep down through this sandstone. Sandstone's a bit like a hard sponge, but water does come through it. And when it gets to a layer it can't seep through anymore, it kind of has to start coming out. So there's shale underneath this cap of sandstone, and the water seeps out here. And we know this spring was here about 700 years ago, because look at these grooves and these holes that have been carved into the sandstone here. These are catch basins, used for routing the water back here along this ledge. You might imagine that these things, maybe one of these belonged to a family. Maybe this was a way of distributing the water evenly among people, so that when this was filled, that was your supply of water. As you used it during the day, you'd have to wait for it to fill up again and to use the other water. So I think it might represent a distribution system for the water here. But these holes were definitely carved here back then, and they were a means of routing water back here. And we've got these holes all along the back side here. So this spring was definitely in use when this place was occupied. And the period of time we know people were living here is somewhere between the year 1200 through about 1280 or 1290 AD. We also know that these caves and alcoves were used in earlier times. They were shelters that were known of back in the 500s and 600s. A lot of the time we find evidence of early occupation, like pit houses and things underneath the pueblos that were built on top of them. And the way we date our dwellings here is by using these pieces of wood back here. Now, these are left over from the original construction. They were found when this place was excavated and cleaned up. And these pieces of wood back here, a core has been taken out of some of them, and we sent it off to a tree ring dating lab. It's called dendrochronology. And that's a means for us to figure out the age of these dwellings by dating the building materials. And wood is the one thing we can do that with. This is surprisingly a small amount of wood, considering how large this place was at one time. But you know, when these places were first discovered back in the 1800s, 1870s, 1880s especially, there were people coming into these dwellings on pot hunting expeditions, or just wondering what was up here. Or there were even cowboys that were running cattle on ute land in the area and coming up here into these dwellings to spend the night. Well, they made for themselves a cozy little campfire, and they used a lot of this prehistoric building material for their campfires. So that's why we don't have as much wood left in here as we would like. But fortunately, some was left, and that's how we are able to get a date for this place. So about 1200 to about 1280 or 1290 AD, people were living here. Any questions back here?
What about the use of carbon-14 and krypton-argon dating?
It's been used in some cases, but I believe the tree rings are able to give us a little bit more accurate date here because, you know, we know the sandstone is 80 million years old. I mean, we've got some idea of that from doing some archomagnetics, from like lining up the magnetics and whatnot, so we can date the sandstone cap. But carbon-14 dating can be messed up by the amount of carbon that we have put into the air and things. So I believe that the tree ring dates for these locations give us a more accurate date. And plus, with carbon-14, you destroy a significant amount of the piece that you're dating. With the tree ring dates, you don't destroy as much. So it's more economical in a sense for us because we have more of the artifact remaining to us. But the carbon-14 and the potassium argon or whatever else you might use, it does destroy the piece that's being dated. You have to break it down into its molecules in order to figure out how old it is. So this retains us stuff for us. I think that's probably why it's been used as opposed to the others.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's move on over here. I think some carbon-14 has been used in some of the fire pits when some of the charcoal that's been So that's the confirmation on the date. Take a look at a kiva over here.
Yeah, I'll just take the cards out.
I don't have this for the living room. Looks more like a hot tub. You got a hot tub, huh?
Go on. Oh, she goes.
Probably in the same room they lived in. Multi-purpose rooms. One room would be used for many different purposes. During the wintertime, they had chambers on. This room that we're looking into here is a kiva, and these are circular rooms. There are 21 kivas in Longhouse. That was in addition to the 150 rooms. And a kiva, we believe, has a special significance. Now, really, as an archaeologist would be looking at this, there's really not much more we could say about a kiva other than that it's a round room and it was sunk into the floor and it seems to have had a special purpose. But what we have done is that we have invited people here from the pueblos near here to come and tell us what they think kivas were for. Because, you know, there are modern day Pueblo people that have rooms that are very similar to this. And, you know, even some modern Pueblo people believe that their ancestors were the Anasazi. And for some, this is a pilgrimage. This is a place to come to see where their ancestors came from. So a kiva, based on what modern Pueblo people have told us, probably had ceremonial functions. And this was a place where rituals took place. It was probably also a room with domestic purpose as well. You can imagine that when it's cold and snowy outside, with this room sunk down into the floor a bit, it retains heat better, and it's a nice place for everybody to spend part of the winter. And you can imagine people sitting around here telling stories, talking with each other, maybe playing games. It may have been a dormitory for young men. It could have been all sorts of things. But based on what people like the Hopi or Zuni or Acoma have told us, we believe that the kiva also has features that are similar to theirs, so perhaps the Anasazi had similar beliefs. For instance, the little hole down there. Anybody know what that is from other visits here? A spirit hole, or it's known as a sipapu. And that is something, at least that's what the Hopi would call it. And the sipapu, for them, is representative of a spiritual life that is found within the earth and of a journey from worlds below to the world that we live in now. Maybe the Anasazi had a similar belief because you find a similar feature here. And then the fire pit there, you can see that that's the larger hole. And then the wall there in front of the fire pit. You know, these are very well engineered. Only stone tools to build these, but some of the kivas are almost perfect circles, almost 360 degrees, some of them. And they had a good ventilation system. That shaft there in the wall that comes up and out with this hole up top is a ventilator system. If you have a roof on top of the kiva with a hole in the roof with a ladder going into the room, that's how you got in and out. That hole in the roof is a place where draft is created and the smoke and heat is drawn up and out of it. At the same time, the hot air is being drawn out, cool air is being pulled in through the shaft in the wall. When it strikes the wall here, then it's able to circulate in a fashion that creates a flow of air in here so that it never gets too smoky. That was 700 years ago that someone, even before that, kivas have these features. 800, 900 years ago, people were building things this soundly engineered. And it really does make sense, and it prevents the room from getting too smoky. And look how much smoke was in here at times. These blackening areas up here are the result of fires that used to burn in here, especially during the winter months to keep these people warm when they were down here. So kivas, I think, you know, aside from the fact that we've been able to make some comparisons with modern-day Pueblo people and maybe come up with some ideas as to what was happening here, just by itself, engineering-wise, I think it's a bit of a marvel. And people with a background in construction and engineering have a hard time believing that people did this with just stone tools. Any questions here before we leave this area around the kiva? Sure.
The ripple flooring up here.
The ripple flooring, well, that's the result of it being an 80 million year old beach. And that's a sand beach back up in there. And that's just natural from times when water ran across that. But in some places you will see where they've actually dug out some stuff for sharpening tools. But that back there is part of the sandstone. Okay? Sure.
There's some places it looks like there was a passageway that everybody could use back here, but then you kind of come to these walls. Did they go through people's rooms?
Well, you know, it's hard to say. They didn't leave us any written records. So I would imagine that there were certain areas that were public passage and that were places where you could get from one part of the dwelling to the other. More than likely on the fronts of a lot of these buildings there were like a balcony-like structure that you could walk around the outside of the building up above. Like across from us there where we first came up the ladder, there were sticks coming out of the wall there. That was probably a balcony on the front of that at one time. So that would have been a means of getting from place to place. I would imagine that this was some kind of a public thoroughfare through here, and then this back area was more than likely a community workspace. That, like you said, you know, it was easy for us to walk through there. But I would think that there were certain rooms that, you know, belonged to a family, and you didn't necessarily go in there without permission. But perhaps during certain parts of the day, you were welcome to walk from one end to the other. It's hard to say what went on. You could probably come up with some ideas of your own as to how it would have worked. But that's just kind of using a little logic to figure it out. I don't know if that helps to answer it, but I would imagine there was some kind of a public thoroughfare where you could have gone from one end of the dwelling to the other and passed through other people's territory.
Have they tried to make an artist rendition of how it might have looked at one time?
Some of these, yes. Over in the museum, you see the dioramas there?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, if you go over there, there's one of Spruce Tree House where artists have put Spruce Tree House back together the way they think it might have been. So it's been done in some cases. I don't know if one's ever been done for Longhouse. It's hard to say because so much of Longhouse is gone. There was so much of it built on fill dirt. It's really kind of hard to imagine exactly what was here. But I know they have done that for Spruce Street because that's one of the better preserved. And that one you can see pretty good idea what it was like. Let's go up here and around the corner to my right, and we'll stop on top of the kiva. Didn't have a whole lot up. So creating some additional workspace and living space by using the roof of your kiva, I think makes sense. And these roofs are pretty substantial. Some of them, after they had the wood parts of the roof on, would have adobe maybe 6 or more inches thick on top. So this created a patio and an area to do some additional work or just some additional living. This hole here is the hole down into the kiva. Now, we don't have enough time for all of us to go in and out of here, but if you do want to go into a kiva, that same dwelling I mentioned, Spruce Tree House, does have a reconstructed kiva in it also, and that one you can go down into. But that'll give you a little idea of how much light was down in here. So they probably had to get used to the darkness of being in there. Now, there is a little bit of Anasazi artwork still left in these dwellings. If you look up there on that sandstone wall, just about up where I'm pointing to, you might notice something that has been left behind by them. Everybody spot it? Yeah, handprint right up there. It's on its side. And right about where you're standing there as you come out. Tall on its side. No, actually in height, I think they're about 5 foot to 5'5" in height. So somebody was standing on a roof up here, no longer here.
Wow.
See, that'll also give you a little idea of the size of the people. That's probably an adult's handprint. And I know everybody got spotted? Or anybody else can't find it? See it? It's right up there. Right, you see about 3 little holes in the sandstone block as you start coming up the ceiling. And then just a little bit up from those holes, right as the wall starts to curve up, it's on its side. It's the right hand. Well, I would imagine somebody had some plaster on their hand and left a print up there. Maybe somebody was just fooling around and wanted to leave us something to think about. It may actually have some real significance for the people that did it, because we find these handprints in most dwellings of some sort, some kind of a handprint. We also find them throughout the entire Southwest. So maybe they did have special significance. It's just hard for us to say what it was. It might just be somebody was fooling around and decided to leave a handprint.
Harry loved Anna.
Yeah, same kind of thing. Yeah. But it could be a mark of ownership. It could be something that means something very significant, but we've lost the meaning to it, or we never really had it.
Laser did use it to mark horses. I don't remember what that means.
I'm not sure how it might relate to these people either. It's hard to say. Well, we're going to finish things up in this lower courtyard. Mesa Verde has 2 of these central courtyards. Longhouse has 1 of them. So let's go on down here and finish things up below us.
How deep is it?
I don't know. Not exactly. know if that's where their ancestors are from here.
It's kind of fun to me thinking that, well, this is really here.
Oh yeah, and you know, size-wise, the people here were probably very comparable in size to people living in Europe at that time. Yeah. I mean, you think of the civilization and just the comparison there. Yeah. Now, this courtyard here is, people, archaeologists included, can't agree on everything, and archaeologists cannot agree on what this courtyard was. Two families lived in them, and they always didn't have room to have a kiva. So maybe this was a place for everybody to come to for special things. It's a possibility. And we can't agree that this is a kiva or not, but it does have some things in it that maybe are like a kiva, and not all kivas are round. Some of them you find are square. But here's the fire pit. Perhaps this is representative like the spirit hole is. And on either end here we have these trenches, and maybe these were for storage, but you know, if you put planks on top of these bins, they're like a foot drum. And we didn't find planks on top of them. But maybe these were something that were used to create some music or rhythms for ceremonies or dances. This is all possible. But again, nobody can agree. So any one of the 3 or 4 ideas that I put forth here, you can pick whichever one you like, and you'd be right until they can decide what this place actually was. Now, there's something that I didn't mention as far as why people may have come in to live in these dwellings. And one thing we will never know for sure is what the people's belief system was, how they regarded their spirits or how they looked at the world. But you know, if you look out here and you take a look at what this dwelling creates here, it's a circle. And circles were evidently important, or at least that circular figure. A kiva is circular for the most part. Well, you know, if you take a kiva and you turn it on its side, it's a bit like looking into a cliff dwelling. So maybe this whole cliff dwelling for them was a huge kiva. I don't know, that's what I like to think. But again, you may not like that idea, and you can come up with any other number of ideas for why it was important for them to move their home into this cave or alcove. Now, eventually they left here. They spent almost 100 years working on this, building on it, constantly doing it, changing it, and then they left it. You leave it for all sorts of reasons. One of the most accepted theories at this point is that there was a drought affecting them. In the year 1276, and for the next 24 years, there was an extensive drought, especially for that first 13 years. And look what drought is doing to our country right now. Look how we're having to deal with less water in certain parts of the country and the crops that we're not able to grow or are having trouble with. These people experienced it for 24 years. That means every year you're going to be able to produce less seed to plant for the next year, and the next year, and the next year, to the point that you might get to the point where you can't feed your people. So that means you're maybe going to go look for another place to live. Also, there is a theory that there was a mini ice age occurring about that time in the 13th century. So maybe it was time to start looking for other places because the climate was changing, the kind of animals available to you will change, the availability of food is going to change, and I think that's a good reason for looking for someplace else. Also, there are theories that perhaps they were having trouble with invading people. That's hard to say. There's not a lot of evidence to prove that. Maybe as things got tougher, they started to fight among themselves. That's a possibility. In any case, people started to leave here kind of slowly through the years, and by the year 1300, there was really nobody left here. And that's true in a lot of areas throughout the entire Southwest. So whatever affected these people may have affected others elsewhere, and again, it may have been a totally different story somewhere else. So you can see that there are more questions to this dwelling than we will ever have answers to. And maybe as you visit some other parts of the park here on your visit to Mesa Verde, you might come up with some better ideas, or some different ideas, or maybe believe in some of the things that I've mentioned. But like I say, it's common sense, and you can use your own to figure out a lot of what was going on here. And I hope you do visit other areas of the park, and also the pit houses and other things that show what people were living in before they moved into these dwellings. So, I don't know, anybody have anything they'd like to share here before they go, or any questions before we leave? Because just as the Anasazi left, we're about to.
I noticed up here as we were coming down, the ventilation shaft from one kiva to the next, it seemed like it went through one into the other.
You've actually spotted a tunnel. In some cases, there are tunnels that connect kivas. Maybe as a family grew larger, you built a kiva next door so that you had communication from one to the next, so you could get back and forth. That's a possibility. But we do see kivas with tunnels going between them. In some cases, we see kivas with tunnels that go to a room. And sometimes in some dwellings, you find that kivas have tunnels that go into towers. So there are all sorts of ideas you can come up with for why they would have a tunnel going from room to room, where you don't find them in every situation, but you do find them in many.
Well, another question on the size of the windows and the openings and all. I can understand they wanted them as small as possible since they didn't have doors, but there's no real smoke markings like coming out of the small windows up here.
No, that's true. They may not have used those in that way. Also, a lot of that can flake off through the years. They also used to replaster inside. Sometimes they plastered. In some kivas, we found anywhere between 20 to 40 layers of plaster. So they were doing things like that on a regular basis. I really don't know. I hadn't thought about that. That's right. Perhaps there were not fires used in those rooms. That's possible. I can't answer that one. I hadn't thought about it. I really don't know. Maybe it went out and around the other way, but again, I would think I would find smoke coming out of that hole there, because that's the only ventilation area for that.
Yeah, because that's built all the way through the roof.
Well, that also might suggest that during winter times they were using the kivas exclusively as opposed to some of these other rooms for warmth, because those would be harder to heat than the kivas. Yeah, I don't know. Something to wonder about.
Then the heat from the natural heat from the rock.
And this does have a nice exposure for the winter months. It does get sun almost all afternoon. Well, we should start heading up here so I don't have us have to run up the trail to get the tram. We got about 9 minutes or so to get up there. So that way we can at least stop a little bit along the way. We'll talk some more on the way going.
Oh, it's scared. Look. I'm gonna go on.
Julia, wait for me.